Thank you, Heike. It's certainly an honor to be here. I did study German at university at the late 80s, early 90s. German comparative literature was my Bachelor of Arts, my major in my Bachelor of Arts, but I didn't do anything with it for 10 or 12 years before I came to Germany about 6 years ago. So it's slowly getting there. So yeah, if you do have any questions, or just feel free to ask in German or English. There's going to be some German text in these slides, which at a last minute shuffle, I'm going to surprise myself what's coming up next. But the reason, speaking about music industry events or music events in general, the first concert event I remember being at was Simon and Garfunkel's farewell tour. It was at the Akron Rubber Bowl in 1981. So I was like 11 years old. And I just remember we had lawn seats in the giant arena. And I remember walking with my sister hand in hand, kind of like skipping through. We're like, what's that smell? Yeah, this is great here. And it was just a totally enjoyable experience. And I'm always after that feeling again of, what's that? Why am I enjoying myself? Without necessarily being related to marijuana. It can happen. So if you think about what your first concert experience was, your first event where you really felt you were at something special that might have inspired you to be a fan or an artist or a sound engineer or producer, or what has driven you to be here today, maybe there's some kind of correlation. To tell you a little bit more about me, I've got several aliases. I was born Jennifer Helen Schneider. My signature is always J. Helen Schneider, but you'll find me on SoundCloud or Mixcloud or any of the various social media sites or virtual realities as Schneiderella, who is a Gothic genie who was made immortal during the medieval times somewhere near Lower Pomerania. And her magic is that she weaves, as a Schneider does, she weaves magic into people's clothes. So this is an idea, a new concept I had when I signed up for the Uncyclopedia, which is followed and mocked after Wikipedia. So just some rambling, but it all makes sense soon. It's all about signing up for everything and diversifying in order to explore what's going on around you. The Sustainable Love Corporation is my brand. The Sustainable Love Corporation is about benevolent living, about everything you do, sustaining healthy living, responsible business, integrity. And I think that is, as a corporation, it doesn't have to be a paradox. So as the Sustainable Love Corporation, the values I developed in the business as a freelancer now for, I think altogether, about 16 years I've been freelancing. In between, I've taken jobs as a creative director, producer, all kinds of just video director, producer, events, music producer for commercials. The list is really, I'm trying to keep it concise because I'm eventually going to get to this music industry event creation and design. But the values of my company are about honesty, empowerment, respect, passion, imagination, of course, learning, impact, resourcefulness, always humor, and being fair. And that's always, if you keep all these other things in line, the fairness is fairly obvious, should be. The advice I could give for events of any kind, and this is, everything's a widget. When you're producing anything, it's about your target audience. And I'd like, if you're producing it, has anyone here had anything to do with promoting any kind of party or special event or exhibition? Show of hands. Just a few, one? Okay, well, this is something if you start to do or if you get involved in, as an artist, as a performer, as the producer, as the booker, as anything, these are really interesting concepts to keep in mind. I think they're applicable, that your content should always win over your gimmicks. Some people succeed with gimmicks only, but if there was nothing to back it up, it's just something that comes and goes. Investigate your stakeholders. I came to Germany and I worked for a company, an agency in Cologne, and I was assigned with the task of creating a concept for their brand identity at a large trade fair. The company was ABB, and they do alternative energy. So I'm looking into finding out what's going on with the company, and I find out, oh, Dick Cheney was on the board of directors when ABB sold nuclear power to North Korea. Oh, shit. You know, and I got to put my passion behind this, and I'm not a hyper-political person, but I like to think that I'm aware. So in my good conscience, what am I contributing to? Well, I want to be honest with what I'm doing for the client. I also want to be honest with what I'm doing at the Sustainable Love Corporation about sustainability and caring for people. And I'm discovering this client that I'm asked to work for does some things that are against my politics. So investigating, then I find out that the current CEO had just stepped down and the CFO had stepped up. So the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, CFO, Chief Financial Officer. So there was already some internal struggles. And how do you present this company to an audience when their company's in flux? So being sensitive to what they're trying to sell continuously, about what they're going on internally, and still feel like you're not fooling anyone. You know, to do something, then stepping forward with nuclear power was not going to be on my brand agenda. They do a lot of stuff with robotics, so I was hoping that we could emphasize robotic technology at the fair. So investigating the stakeholders, that is your client, that's your team. Investigate your team, who you're working with. Your boss, I asked my assistants, let me see your resume. What do you want to be when you're beyond this already? What do you want to get out of this? And if you investigate who people are, where they came from, you can play off their strengths, you can help them with their weaknesses, and see how they can help you. So this is a general advice. Audience above everything. That's why people do events. They're trying to reach out with a message, whether it's a public event, which is just straight up for audience satisfaction and enjoyment. A concert, well, you could argue that they're for selling albums or selling a product, but generally a public event or public experience should be a cultural event, should be like a gift to the public. So keeping the audience in mind, why they're there, who they are, what they could use. This is a general event advice. Support your team and re-explain. I had this funny conversation yesterday with a friend. He's like, my intern, I'm telling him over and over what has to be done. I can't believe he's still not doing it. I said, why don't you change the way you're trying to explain it? Because if you're already explaining something that you feel like you've explained 2 or 3 times, this could be with your family. I mean, I have to do this with my parents. They just don't get it if you explain your position from one standpoint. Try and change it. See if you can get them to understand what would be helpful to you and their goals and to the project by explaining it a different way. It's general good advice for day to day. Emphasize draft and use disclaimers. There's a funny video called The Lady Doesn't Get the Rough Cut. And it's about this woman, you know what a rough cut is. So you have a video you're creating, and the first version is the rough cut. It's not final, there's time code on it. You need voiceover, it's just a rough cut. And then the client sits there and says, why does this have time code on it? We need a voiceover, where's the music? It's a rough cut, it's a draft. And in creating any event or doing any kind of project, you have to realize everyone at the table needs to know that you're in draft mode, that you're still in development, because you find yourself in meetings where people expect what comes out of your mouth is going to happen, or that you really believe entirely what you're saying, when sometimes it's just the brainstorm. So I like to put draft what is it in German? Entwurf. Thank you. Entwurf all over everything. What is this Entwurf? Confidential, vertraulich, Entwurf. These things can only help you. Then you know when the final is the final. And sign up for everything. Back to my avatars. It's going to help you in creating any kind of event. It's going to help you just navigating life. You find out something's the new hot trend, it doesn't hurt you to sign up. Make a special account where you know you're going to receive spam mail. But it's invaluable when creating events, in music events, or events that involve any kind of greater public or fans, that you know how that they're greeting and meeting each other or what the hot new things are. If you've got time, you can spend more time in it. At least you've kind of gotten in, you've familiarized yourself for 20 minutes with something, and who knows where that could lead. So that's general advice. Events. I wanted to focus on some events and then conferences, which is ultimately why I've been invited to speak here today and how I ended up in Germany altogether. I started with summer camp, which I went back as far as what was the first event I ever did. I worked at a summer camp for kids with cystic fibrosis. I signed up for this because it was a week away. It was for a week away from home. I was living with my parents. And I didn't even know what cystic fibrosis was. I had to look it up in the book encyclopedia. And then I was horrified because I already signed up. I thought, these kids are going to be carrying an iron lung around. It's a respiratory disease. You're born with it. And your enzymes don't process fluids. It's a chronic lung disease. And the kids were dying, I think. The average age was 18 back in when I was doing this. And now they're living a lot longer now. People with cystic fibrosis, they've isolated the gene. Anyway, it's a tangent. But I went and participated in this event for then 4 years in a row, 1 week out of every summer, and we did all kinds of things with the kids, sports activities, theater. They just needed to feel like they were in a regular camp environment doing fun stuff, and that was my job as a programming person to come up with fun stuff for the kids to do. Good times. Moves into concerts. I had a cousin who was a production manager for the local promoter, Belkin Productions. They're now part of the Live Nation empire, so she explained to me how local promoters work. You're a local promoter, you are renting out a venue, doing the promotion, bringing in a band, everything's made. It's mom and pop. You're making the money, you're paying all your stagehands. It's really lucrative. It's a lot of fun. People trust the events you put on, they're safe. They grew it, they grew it, they grew it. They ended up running the Midwest. So all the big shows, the Rolling Stones, the Grateful Dead, the Eagles. This is definitely back in the 90s, the early 90s. But in the medium-sized shows, then they bought venues and they had their own venues, and it was a real success story for this company. Well, then they were bought out by SFX, then they were bought out by Live Nation. That was bought out by Clear Channel, and what happens now with giant tours is they promise they'll take an act like Katy Perry, and they will book Katy Perry at the Live Nation venues across the country. And it doesn't matter if the market can support it. They have to lock it in. So the cities lose money if their fans aren't if it's not going to be a good Katy Perry night. So take a more of someone who won't sell out. You're going into an event knowing that you're going to lose money. So knowing a lot of the people who started in that small promoter, and it's really a sad. They were very passionate at the time, doing something that they knew was going to be exciting, picking acts that they knew were going to work. And now the marketplace is Clear Channel. It's House of Blues. I don't know if you know these names. House of Blues and Clear Channel Entertainment are the two main concert promoters worldwide. In Germany, I think it's Lieberberg out of Frankfurt. I think he's the Live Nation promoter in Germany. So there's even a worldwide network of promoters when they do world tours. It's an interesting aspect of the business for sure. I've done fundraisers. I was in Fiji for the Mir re-entry observation expedition. When the Mir re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, we had a jet that flew a parallel path and captured it on high def, the re-entry of the Mir. And I created the animation that you saw on CNN to see how that was going to look coming down. Now, when I say I created it, I had a script from the scientists at NASA that thought they knew what it was going to look like when it re-entered. And I worked with some ex-Lucas guys. I was in San Francisco at the time, and they rendered this approximation. And it was, that was kind of a proud moment. Turns out the Mir entered faster than we thought, so it broke apart earlier, but in the same way. And since I was standing on the beach and the guy from CNN had his camera there, you could hear me saying, "It looks just like our animation," you know, which is, I felt like professional success. But a lot of really, you just find, and I found myself just being in kind of the right place at the right time, or just a place at a time where someone said, "Helen, do you think we can do this? Do you think we can manage the worldwide press for the Mir space station reentry?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." Because if you follow all the earlier advice, you know, everything is a business of people, everything's about the audience, and if you set your goals and you're honest and you ask questions and you say, "What do you mean by that?" A quick funny story about the Mir. They wanted to rent a jet plane, and they thought they would sell tickets per window. And then my colleague and I were sitting there, we're like, this doesn't work out. They counted windows on both sides of the plane. Well, you can't. We thought, is it us? How could everyone be talking about this for weeks and give us a legitimate budget? But somebody just didn't think of it, and it happens. Don't ever think that because somebody had an idea before you or gave you a proposal that it's flawless. I've gone into pitches and actually pitched a job for a company that was the wrong company. Our account director said it was for PlayStation, but it was for Sony United. So there we were pitching for, and PlayStation is just a part of the whole Sony empire, and we were standing there in front of the client with the PlayStation presentations, and just that was on all the paperwork we got. So things happen. Always question it. Always question what's going on. It's not your fault for someone to have to explain something to you. Back in the kind of advice rules, explaining, it's people's obligation to explain to you until you understand everything. So I'm going to just jump ahead onto the festivals and conferences. In Cleveland, the promoter I worked for, we did the Cleveland Country Music Festival, the Great American Rib Cook-Off, which always had music acts. I don't know, there would be no names here, perhaps, but Charlie Daniels Band and Rick Springfield and kind of the has-been acts would do the Rib Cook-Off circuit, but it was still a lot of fun, a lot of beer. I worked on the concert for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. Museum is in Cleveland. It was designed by I.M. Pei. He was in the audience. It's an amazing concert, 80,000 people in the old Art Deco stadium in Cleveland, and it was huge. What was most impressive for me was it was this clash of the titans. It was the live concert event people and the people from television. The people from LA had come to Cleveland to tell these rock and rollers how to do a show. And you know, granted, you have to stage a little bit differently for live. If you're straight up staging for live versus staging for video, you know, and then you've got the alpha tier, you know, kind of going at each other about how it's supposed to be. But in the trailer I was working at, and I was just the assistant to the stage manager for the whole show, so I'm bringing his cappuccinos on stage and just seeing whatever he needed. And in the trailer was the video director, and they had, I think, 16 cameras, and he was calling the show live from the trailer, which was incredible. You're just kind of hanging out, and the director's live doing this amazing show with all these amazing rock and rollers. And that sticks with you. Again, with just watching pros at work, these shows were flawless. It's good. I mean, there's a reason people have that. When they know that their team's doing it the right way, there's a kind of confidence and pride, and there's this moment where you have to kind of check in and kind of check your trust with the other people who are doing another significant part of the show. So, I'll skip right down here. I did a film financing conference, which was interesting, and a lot of corporate sales and marketing events for pharmaceutical, for cars, product launches. I worked on the product launch for the Mini Cooper in the US when we had 70 Minis across the Golden Gate Bridge right after 9/11 and getting the helicopter shots. There's permits you got to pull for everything. So the larger the scale, the crazier it gets, but it can all be done. I got to Germany, did some trade fair stuff, lost my job in the crisis, and decided to stay and work as a freelancer. And the first larger project that I got was at the Europareise at the CO Pop Festival. And this Europareise network is festival directors from around the world. And they come to Cologne to network with each other. A lot of them bring showcases of their bands from their countries. And yeah, it's a meetup. I mean, everything can't be virtual. Which led me to the gig at Berlin Music Week, which is what I'm going to get into next. It just closed out. September 30th was my last day on that job, so there's still some wrapping going on. But it's interesting to create a brand new music industry event, and that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about now. Does anyone have any questions so far? Am I talking too fast? Okay. All right. So, I was looking for work. I was doing the regular hustle that people do when they're looking for work. I'm doing translations here and there. I'm doing some cultural projects on my own. I did an exhibition on Cleveland punk in Cologne at one of the galleries there. But the phone rang on February 7th. And I talked to the head of the project, a guy named Björn Döring, who said, we met at the Europareise last year. What are your plans? Are you committed? We need someone to come in and step in and do this new business industry conference. I was like, well, send me the details. So here's where we got a lot of text coming on, but I thought what's cool is to show you the text. What does it look like when someone gets a letter to pitch for a job that's kind of huge? The history was, Popcom ist raus, die Kulturprojekte Berlin koordiniert jetzt die gesamte Veranstaltung, inklusive des Branchen- oder Professionalteils. This was my main task. Has everybody got it? So then listing out the actual details, this is looking like a pretty significant piece of work. Konzeption eines neuen Branchenteils, Erarbeitung eines USP, möglicht viele Bandvertreter zur aktiven Mitarbeit innerhalb der BMW zu animieren, and then bring people to Berlin internationally, from the international set. Also work with the existing partners. I'll get it. More, there's more. Look for new Impulsgebers, create pillars for the event, deliver all the content and formats for press and marketing, and also develop some concepts for brands and sponsors to integrate. And give me a sketch and what you would want for this in 4 days. So, yeah, I was up for it. So, I submitted my proposal, and this is just a first page blurb. I mean, if I've got time, I can I would like to send this all to you later. I can send you these documents. I think it's a super interesting examination of what happens, and I have no confidentiality with Berlin Music Week. It's a Senat. It's funded by the Senat, so it's public money. It's a public event, and there's nothing dubious here. This is really, it's public information. I submit my proposal, and on the 29th of February, I went down to meet the team, and the next day led a workshop with the partners. My general idea was to have a festival radio. It's centralized. It was totally new. Does everyone here, let me back up a minute. Has anyone here heard of the Popcom? A couple people? Yeah, Popcom was started in Cologne years ago. Do you know when it was started? Ages ago, 10 plus years. And then it was reasonably successful. Do you know? 2004. It was reasonably successful, and then they hauled off to Berlin. There was some kind of media exodus to Berlin, and Popcom went with it and was run by the Messe Berlin, which is the trade fair organization in Berlin. So it started this whole idea of the trade fair being a viable business model for Branchentreff or business meetings. It was just on the decline. Midem is a giant messe where people really, it's established, it's far from hokey, meaning it's really solid and reliable, and you get good product demonstrations, and it's just super quality event. There doesn't need to be more than one a year, and Popcom wasn't competing. Their Congress, when they were adding in speakers, it was really just booking people on a stage as part of the trade fair floor. So this is just really conflicting. It wasn't intimate. It didn't have anything special to offer to the people who went. So I thought, okay, you're starting something new, concept to do a festival radio. If you have some people in the room, great, but it's broadcast, so every partner could have a segment of a time slot, and it's really virtual, and then you have more meeting places for people to just dialogue or to network instead of and the content can be amplified worldwide via the net or local radio station. So this was my idea, and it incorporated a lot of things that he had wanted to see. So I got the gig, but it didn't really end up like that. But we'll get there. The first workshop, pardon me, talking a lot. Okay. As was mentioned in this briefing that I got in the mail, there were partners that were already at the table. The Berlin Music Commission and the Club Commission were the guys that initially had the idea to do a Berlin Music Week. That the Kulturprojekte Berlin, which is the agency that was able to kickstart that and make it happen, is a different story. But the Kulturprojekte has several projects. They do Art Week, they do the Transmediale, they do Creative City Berlin. They've got about 12 to 14 different things going on. In Berlin Music Week, and this would be its third year, was experiencing a lot of changes. So this group came together and decided what the new industry conference was going to be. So the Berlin Music Commission, and this is just a short description of what some of these players do, they strengthen the music business in Berlin with each other and outwardly. The Club Commission does lobbying and networking for the club community, which is a very viable economic player in the city of Berlin. A lot of tourists go to Berlin. People been to Berlin? Anyone been to Berlin? Yeah, it's good times there, good club experiences. I think it's been interesting learning a lot about that, just the element that all of these different organizations are working with a very specific group of players in the music scene. And the idea that we would bring them all under one roof during Berlin Music Week and showcase what it is that they do and have everyone working together. All Together now emerged after the Popcom initially said that they weren't going to exist anymore, and they just started networking, doing salons and workshops for artists. CTM Festival is a member of ICUS, the International Cities of Advanced Sound. It's a festival network, and I'd say these guys knocked my socks off. They, as you can read, uphold the cultural value of music and sound creation in both an absolute sense and in the multifarious forms that meld music and sound with other cultural practices. These guys are really behind the culture and subculture of music, not so much the maximum. I would say Berlin Music Commission is working with medium to large size businesses, Club Commission strictly with clubs, VUT, Verband Unabhängiger Musikunternehmen, is self-explanatory for smaller businesses, independent businesses. The Green Music Initiative was there. Kulturbrauerei and a reporter from City Magazine, when we all sat around and the question was, what was the most memorable business conference that you'd been to and what made it special for you? And when we asked that question, we came up with I threw this in Wordle, Wordle.com, and built a word cloud about everything that everyone said that they wanted, everything that would be special for them, was important for them in a business conference. I thought it looked like a challenge to me. So I sent this around to all the partners. We got feedback, written feedback from Club Transmedial, Jan Rolf, and I just highlighted in red his words. That thought, okay, this really reinforces what I think I heard at the meeting. I mean, written feedback is amazing. If anybody asks you for written feedback, and you take some time and you give it, you really are adding value to what people are trying to accomplish. Because without your feedback and without your voice, you're just relying on one person. When you tell someone something, it's your opinion. When you write it down, you're contributing, and I found that to be true when I talk to anyone who's experiencing problems at work. It's like, oh, you talked about it? I was like, did you write it down? Did you send an email? If it's not documented, it's just your opinion. So, if you see someone writing down something you said, then you know your contribution's been taken to heart. But, we're all in kind of the business world now. You're in the business world as a student because you're in the business of learning and meeting other people and growing. I mean, it can all be attributed to something that you set goals for, and that's what business is. So great feedback from Jan, and then this diagram from Andrea Götzke from All Together Now, how she kind of imagined it. This is a nice feedback too. It doesn't have to be a long literary tome, but a little sketch is like, this is what she imagined. She also sent some text. But okay, yeah, we want something decentralized. We've got artists and professional development and exchange. And let's see what's next. So I sat down with Björn, the project leader, and we said, okay, what's our Zielsetzungen, which it's the foundation and the core of everything you do. If it doesn't feed, if what you think of or what you ideate or create or design doesn't fit here, if it doesn't relate to these target goals, then it falls off, no matter how cool it is. Putting kids out with chalk on the ground to make hopscotch and games has really nothing to do with. I mean, you could force anything into these, though. Really, I mean, it's flexible. But really, when everything's getting absurd. But we had the artist in the center of everything, and then grew out. We wanted things that enveloped tech and learning for the artist. Money, how does the artist make money? The creative environment and cultural exchange, what does that mean for the artist? And sustainability. And not just the physical sustainability and environmental sustainability, but Sustainable Love Corporation. What can you do to make sure that these projects that you initiate work and that they can keep going? So, from that, and I'm jumping ahead, I'm sparing you a lot of the gory details of being in the office. and fighting over why this is a good decision to do. But we kind of took a risk. Word on Sound is an Uber-Konferenz of 9 mini-conferences. And the idea was each one is addressing a specific niche. Now in here you've got the USP, the unique selling point for what this industry conference is. It's a professional development and exchange forum. I've really avoided to say B2B, which is business to business. There's B2C, business to consumer. There's B2B. There's some people say B2Me, which is internal events. So you have your internal sales and marketing events. But it's really professional development and exchange for the music protagonists and curious creatives. I had this neugierig kreative Köpfe, I think. Because, as you all know, there's more than just the actual art of the music in the fold. There's graphics and engineering, there's tech, there's distribution, there's visualization, there's a lot of creative talent outside of just the musician itself when you're talking about music events or the music branch. So the programming and partners are to facilitate the discourse. That is the different Berlin Music Commission, the Club Commission, the Green Music Initiative, all together now, Noisy Music World. And that is the go-to. We're showcasing what the partners have to offer, what they're already doing. This is, as I mentioned, the Senat is the funder, the Geldgeber for this project. They see it as an opportunity to market Berlin as a viable place for people to bring their business, for tourists to come, and to have a showcase Berlin Music Week and all that it can be is nothing without the people who are already doing something. So this is also an important part of what the goals were in the briefing, and it's important to push behind it. I'll get into some of the difficulties and challenges of that in a little bit. But music and all that it inspires, this is where we can get really all-inclusive. Live events, film, art, fashion, academics, community, political action, and digital and analog commerce. So these are the, oops, I'm supposed to get rid of this slide. But these are all the 9 mini conferences, but I was going to take you through them one at a time. The arts and polity, in deciding what the niches were, the idea that this year, Arts and Polity was a pretty big mini conference in the realm of the entire super conference. There was a lot going on with GEMA and a lot going on with the European Creative Industries Alliance held some sessions, and they were talking about in the EU, the issues that are on the table for the cultural agenda throughout the EU. Oh man, I hate that. Does anybody else get that? It's always an update. So various governmental groups present a glimpse into policies. And what's interesting about this, where there's another mini conference, the Denkfabrik, which is almost the pre-policy. There's a clear distinction, even though there's some crossover. So what was interesting was to create these niches and know that people who would be specifically attending this particular mini conference would go to these sessions and then go to maybe some of the other sessions that they knew were influencing them. So the idea to have targeted programming, it's really like in a university setting. You've got your major focus, but then you're also interested in attending something else because you know it will somehow impact your focus, but it's not required of you to go, but it's smart for you to go. It's smart for you to learn as much as you can. So this Denkfabrik, this was spearheaded by this Club Transmediale, the ICUS, the International Cities of Advanced Sound, and they organized all the speakers that came, and drew up a nice manifesto for what the Denkfabrik should be in the context of Berlin Music Week, or the music industry in Berlin. Like this, where and which forms of arts and culture are more likely to flourish? Where do we want momentum, and where do we build a haven? I mean, some of the speakers that came talked about proprietary things that are happening in the digital realm, where your conscience lies with regards to copyright and artist intellectual property. So the Denkfabrik was I want to call it, well, the intellect. It was really I would say the more intellectual side or analytical side of culture as an industry, with music in the center of that as the theme. It came back to music, but what is a cultural environment, and how does that impact the work that the policymakers do? So it's for strategist, futurist, lateral thinkers. Digicon, I call it the new media nerdcore cosmopolite, the nerdy cosmopolitans, conversations about digital music and technology. This was fun. When we had it, there was, do you know the Gregory Brothers? Have you heard of these guys? They do viral, they're one of the hottest viral video producers going. They did this auto-tune the news, where they would take news clips from the news and make songs out of the people that were performing with the auto-tune. Pretty hilarious, more hilarious to watch than to hear me talk about it. I could have had it queued up, but maybe we'll do some surfing in a little bit. So this was just talking about the cultural content that's online, online issues with Urheberrecht. Yeah. The gamut, really. Video, we had some video directors there talking about the change in digital medium, a lot of streaming companies that were there. Musikwoche hosted a panel of startup, relative startup streaming companies to talk to them about edginess and where they were going, where they'd been. So a lot of active participation. The audience was interesting. The audience asked a lot of questions. I think in every mini conference that I was in the room at, I don't know if they were just on good behavior because I was in there. It's my event. But it was really exciting that exchange was really happening. We had an amazing group of academics and cultural creatives and musicians, artists, business people. So you had really someone from every end of the spectrum, or different sides of the square or the cube. I don't know, whatever metaphor you want to use. So questions were being asked and fielded, and it was really a dynamic, engaging environment, which was the whole point, right? Green Berlin Music Week was another mini conference, obviously to highlight the work of partners in the green tech. They went to different clubs. They went to the Velomax, which is the Max Schmeling-Halle, which is a giant green concert event hall, and had a lot of discourse. A lot of energy leaders were there, and people who wanted information about shopping around, how to flip their business. Club Consult is actually also very active. The Club Commission in Berlin has a branch called Club Consult, and they'll go into your club and kind of advise you how to flip it. It's simple as changing your plugs or getting a new refrigerator. I mean, there are really a lot of cost-effective ways that you can actually index and see how much money you save every year just by making a few easy changes. The master class, I didn't want to leave the academics out of the picture, and I thought that was something that I noticed was missing. Even though academics were often invited to speak at conferences, there was no mini conference or special programming for people who were interested in what was happening in academics or just interesting special topics. And the fact that we opened this up for people to nominate speakers made it a little bit more made it more relevant somehow in what people are doing with user-generated content. It's like your fan-generated content. If you're a fan and you think this instructor is really amazing or this person's doing something really new and fresh, you can nominate them to speak, which is a little different than I answered a lot of phone calls from people who wanted to have their person, so as an agent, trying to get their person booked. And I was like, well, a lot of places just take it. They just book that person. They create something around them, but we're really filtering who was invited. What were you talking about? Are you trying to sell your company, or are you really trying to, it's professional development and exchange. We wanted targeted, analytical information and not just a sales presentation. So the idea that people would pay to come and speak was a PopCom thing, or they would pay to rent a booth area and then host their own programming. I mean, these in other conferences. This is really what we were trying to avoid. And I was telling people at the beginning to model it more after a TED conference style, where you had really dynamic speakers coming in, talking about something fresh and new, and being inspiring and not selling. The sales now, it happens on the side. Sales happens when you trust somebody. Sales happens when you make a connection and you understand that someone is interested in how they can help you and not how you can help them by buying something. It's delicate relationshiponomics. I don't know if it's in a word. Dynamics. So anyway, this was masterclass. Most Wanted Music was for musicians, music supervisors, and music publishers. This was spearheaded by the Berlin Music Commission. They worked with the National Association of Recording Industry Professionals out of Los Angeles. This was started by a woman named Tess Taylor, just a phenomenal networker, started this, and she runs music supervisor sessions all over the world, well, primarily in 4 cities. I think she's New York, LA, London, and Berlin. She's done a couple, she did last year at the Berlin Music Week, they did some supervisor sessions. But as an artist, you can sign up and you can pitch your music. She'll bring a gang of music supervisors, and you'll... Everybody knows what music supervisors, the person who builds the soundtrack for TV shows or for movies. So a music supervisor would buy my a cappella version of any given song and put it in a TV show because they know that it'd be the perfect song for a perfect scene or dynamic in a TV show or film. Or there's radio music supervisors. Well, the music supervisor at the radio station basically has the overall view of the music that's played at a station or the direction. So it's always been one of my secret career wishes to be a music supervisor. I don't know, who knows? Who knows? I got probably 30 years left working. It's not much. Yeah, so they bring the buyers in and they come together and they've got an open forum, and then the artists would pitch their music for the supervisors, and the supervisors give them immediate feedback. And I think they had about 80 people that signed up. So that's open. If anyone here is a musician, this is something you could apply for next year. It's free to attend, but you have to get your butt to Berlin. Check out, I mean, again, if I send all this or make this PowerPoint accessible to you, there'll maybe be a few more add-ins. And look into these organizations. I mean, in Cologne and Dusseldorf, I know there's a club commission. I don't know if there's a music commission in Cologne, but there is definitely there's Club Com. Yeah. So, Geld this is another niche in the industry, like who's the business owners, promoters, and marketers? What are the new tools I need? How do I make money? Whether you're established or new, you need the right kind of money to make your idea come to life. And we had lectures on sponsoring, financing, delivery models, and how to strategize your financial investments. For example, we had a guy, and he spoke, Matthias Glachka, I think his name was. His Song Peer, I think is the name of his company, and he is a specialist in HTML5. And he talked about when to invest in an app versus HTML5, because HTML5 can do everything that an app can do pretty much, except like compassing. I don't think it has a compass feature, but it's cheaper, and you don't need to have you don't need to have a special person come in and reprogram your app. I mean, it seemed like a no-brainer solution. So you have an idea, and you're like, oh, and we need an app. And then you've got to, although I guess I talked to the guy who did the app for the Melt Festival. Did anybody go to Melt and use that app? It's still maybe on my phone. But this was a guy named Holger Risse. He works at Intro. They're Melt, and I think he busted the Melt app together for €400. So it's just something about knowing, and all these numbers add up to, you can have a $500,000. I don't know what the Melt budget was. I imagine it's huge. But I went to Melt when I first came to Germany. Was it 2007? And then I went again this past year. It was a total difference. I mean, it was really amazing what they did with the technology and the support, the bathroom facilities. But it was a real branded experience this time. I thought it was really cool. The first year I went, because it was very low key. And this was like every time you turned a corner, there was like the Warsteiner Casino, or just every time you turned the corner, it was a branded experience. And I felt like I was more at a carnival than I was at a festival, like a music conference. So it's funny. I mean, I'm on this side of the business that's being asked to come up with an idea for Warsteiner for a festival thing, and I try to steer clear of those jobs now, because it's just it's where you feel like you belong is also an important part of what you end up, what you produce and how you produce it. It's a conundrum. They call it golden handcuffs, or the velvet rope. You're tied up with a velvet rope. It's really comfortable. You make a lot of money, but you're handcuffed. So when you're free, you can do what you want, but you don't have the income. So I don't know. Some people don't mind now. The Melt Festival is what it is now. I'm happy that they've got a lot of success. But for me, as an audience member, it's a totally different experience. But that all started with the app. Their app cost $400. So the Geld session, the Geld mini-conference, was addressing some of these issues. Where do you invest your money, and how do you get more of it? There's cultural funding, sponsorship funding. How does a sponsor innovative visibility for sponsors? So if it's not just a banner hanging up, what a sponsor could in fact sponsor your app and their names on it, but what do you care? That's a function and it's taken care of. And, maybe with all the bells and whistles that you could afford. Depends what you think you need. The Werkstatt was driven primarily by the All Together Now group with Noisy Music World. Noisy Music World is awesome. If you go to Berlin and you need music equipment or a Proberaum, they do workshops there. They're starting an academy for full-fledged, straight-up learning music, learning to teach music. And they're on Warschauer Straße in Kreuzberg. And they opened up their facility to this Werkstatt where Roland came in and did workshop. Ableton, of course, was there. a lot of circle training on crowdfunding. You kind of went in for these 2 days and you came out, with a lot more realistic, applicable knowledge and things that you could do later that night. Technically to help move along your career. Yeah.
And is that an event or something which happens every year or in a period or something?
Yeah, this as part of the Berlin Music Week. But Noisy has those workshops. They have one, I think, tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, they're constantly running, so I'll put that information in what my leave behind as well, is those resources. Because they'll do 1 day, 2 day workshops all together now also, does salons where they'll get people together. A Head Full of Bees is an artist group. They have this do it together concept for artists, by artists, where artists really are sitting in a group and kind of knocking around ideas, making songs in a day, and just to get those juices flowing. So I was really impressed with the amount of opportunity I saw for musicians and artists in Berlin. I have to say, I lived in Cologne for 5 years, and I love it there. I love it here. I'm happy really wherever I go. It's all your own mindset. But Berlin has incredible opportunities, everywhere you look. It's almost hard to choose. So there's workshops, and this Werkstatt, there was the cost to go to Berlin Music Week as a professional was, the full price ticket was upwards of 275 euros, but the Werkstatt you could go to for 5 euros for the day. So this was because it was it was also in a separate building, so it was more accessible. And probably with a please and a thank you, you could be let in for less or nothing. It's really, it's about being there and offering the support and the peer-to-peer networking and mentoring people to show them. What's funny is there's this idea that people don't want to share their knowledge, but the more knowledge you share, the easier your life becomes, because people know what you know. And if everyone's kind of has a broader common knowledge base, it gets easier. There's hardly any secrets anymore. There's hardly anything completely new and fresh and ingenious. This concept is supposed to be new, but only in comparison to PopCom. I can't say, no, people look at this concept and don't say, wow, that's so new and fresh. It's like, no, there's people doing things like this. But it's new and fresh for a large industry conference in Berlin. And really just, like I say, it's Berlin Music Week. We're trying to create things throughout that week that people are already doing and give them an extra push. If the Senat is investing the money, Kulturprojekte is organizing and putting people behind it, it's to help the people who are already doing the work in these fields and creating programs, supporting programs that are already like this, working with their audiences throughout the year. This Berlin Music Week is an add-on, and I was asked at one point by someone like, does Berlin need a Berlin Music Week? Does Berlin need an industry conference? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, the music industry is the last place where people wouldn't want to get together in person. The music industry is about community and people going out, let's go see a concert, or let's go to a club, or the content itself is really about kind of a togetherness. And to remove an industry conference where people can come and get together seems a little counterintuitive. So, sad. And the last of the 9 mini conferences is the World Nightlife Fund. So this for labels, clubs, promoters, artists, and fans. I was actually in Cologne, and I was sitting with some friends, and we laughed about the World Nightlife Fund being a spoof on the World Wildlife Fund. And we opened a Facebook page for it, and that was kind of it. And we talked about what it could be. And then in the context of doing this event, I was like, oh yeah, this is a good use of the idea of the World Nightlife Fund. So we called this 9th mini conference the World Nightlife Fund for labels, clubs, promoters, artists, and fans who just generally want to know about sustaining that culture. The community, I mean, and that is from the subculture to what I was calling the mega mainstream. It's a drive to celebrate and enjoy life. And back to the top of the hour, when you think about the audience, and I think about my sister and I at Simon and Garfunkel, you know, and like we didn't even know we almost didn't even realize what was going on around us. That's something that's happened to me. I had a radio show at university. Every time I went in there, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was putting something on, grabbing some records, having friends come up, prank calling people on the air. And I had fans, you know, I had fans that said, "I love you, make it sound like you don't know what you're doing." I'm like, yeah, it's good, it's a good gig. But you don't, and now going back, I realize, you don't realize always where you are until later. And this memory or this idea of if I could do that again, what would I do different? Now I'm in the pattern of asking my future self, what would I do differently? It's like, would my future self want me to do something different now? You know, probably for those radio shows I might have done. Although I did do some pretty cool stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to say I was a total junkie on the radio. But I did some funny mashups. I'd get music albums from the library, old like Mae West westerns, or with tape recorder, the Bugs Bunny shows, and I would mash those up into my radio show. So it's good. I mean, I have no regrets about the stuff, but you always think, oh, I could have done more. Now that I know more, I could have done more. Why wasn't I paying attention? But the idea that you're just there and you're kind of celebrating and enjoying it for what it is at the moment and not thinking about or sweating about, you know, what it's not or what it could be. So we had best practice sessions for clubs. The Club Commission came through with some amazing sessions on the club as an economic factor. The club is the threat. The club's kind of under threat as a economic factor, especially with this game of tariffs. They would hike up the tariffs on the clubs for the music they played, making it really cost prohibitive to have a successful business. And special interest panels only fell really into the World Nightlife Fund. We had vinyl preservation and record store survival panel, which was Simon Raymond, who's from the Cocteau Twins. He was the bass player for the Cocteau Twins. He runs a label in England, and some English journalists, some musicians from Sparks, and it was hosted by Keno Mescher from here in Cologne. He's at the WDR Funkhaus. He was the music director at Köln Campus Radio, and it was interesting to have such a diverse group of people talking about vinyl preservation, you know, at a kind of worldwide level. World Nightlife Fund. How did it look at a glance? This whole concept. We did this schedule and the conference guide about 2 weeks before the event. So in an ideal world, we would have started it a couple months in advance, but as you can imagine, and I don't know how easy I'm making this sound, but it was really a lot of work, a lot of things to deliver in a couple months, a whole new concept, the organization, working and bringing the partners together who, you know, not all of everyone got along. That's just how it is, until recognizing that we all have a common wish, and you swallow your own attitudes sometimes, and you just make things work because of the audience, the people that you want to bring to the city. And there's not one partner that I worked with that I felt didn't have a pure intention. So this idea of wanting things to be a success, wanting Berlin specifically to thrive as a music industry go-to place, I think that's the overall goal, and they want to show that we can do it and we can do it right. So, and it is competitive. It's a competitive market for cities to have something, an asset that really brings people there. San Francisco and the Silicon Valley, for example. I mean, there is a reason. I mean, reason to go to San Francisco in the '60s is different than to go to San Francisco in the '80s. So this is sort of how it looked. The conference guide sort of explained everything page by page, and then in the center was just a schedule where you could see, oh, what's this happening? Where do I need to be when? And it color-coded with the 9 mini-conferences, which was interesting to see at the end. What was interesting was the color balance at the end, and to see what mini-conference had a stronger presence. And this was the idea to sell it. Maybe the master class is just, we have so many nominated great speakers, it's the big highlight next year. Academics will be the top subject trending in the music industry. So it's interesting there too, what's the question, what's trending? People they go to these things to find out what's trending and what's new. So some additional programs were thrown in the side. But that's kind of at a glance. It was 3 days. For our keynote kickoff this here at Wednesday, another interesting element, well, what was missing, you know, a keynote address is the key message, the most important message that is delivered in the context of a business meeting or a business conference. And the keynote opening is generally your kickoff, right? Your keynote kickoff. And we're thinking, what is going to kick off this new concept? What's going to kick off Berlin, Word on Sound at Berlin Music Week? What's going to make this special? And we're sitting in the room, and people are throwing out ideas. And I thought, and it was a list of all men. There was not one single woman on the list. And I thought, well, where are they? Where are the women? You can't tell me that this is not the case. Our office was made up of more than 50% women just working on the project. So we started coming up with some ideas, and then we thought, well, it was still a struggle. And then we decided to make it only women, not as a gender issue, but yeah, certainly a gender statement, I guess, that there are a lot of powerful women in the industry doing a lot of incredible things to move the industry forward in a healthy direction. And then the list, we couldn't stop coming up with names for the list, but it was all about who could fit where. Ended up with Tess Taylor, who founded the NAREP, Billy Ray Martin, who's a vocalist and label owner, also a very, I would call her a social media activist, a web activist, a digital activist for the industry. Medea Cohen, she runs a school for creative startups in London and is looking to open one in Berlin as well. And Marusha. And a funny story about Marusha, Bjorn, the project leader, said that she just booked her. And we hadn't discussed it, so I was like, well, who is this woman? And as you know, I'm not German. I missed this specific scene. And I was just doing some internet research thinking, oh, okay, this is a Love Parade child, a child of the Love Parade scene and techno explosion in Berlin. I was thinking, what could she talk about? How about, and I asked her then in a mail, if you talk about the gentrification of subculture. And we had some really nice emails back and forth, and we had a wonderful conversation, and that's exactly what she talked about. The gentrification of subculture, when something that you're part of suddenly explodes, and you've got you're a worldwide phenomenon for no reason other than doing something that you love, and something that was small, and something that was intimate, and how do you cope with that? And I guess the key message I would pull out of her keynote to share with you now is never see yourself as a victim. And that is one of the most amazing things that I learned working on this project is like, yeah, that, you get the shit kicked out of you sometimes because some people just don't like the way you wore your hair. Or they trash some decision, a creative decision you made because they thought they would have done it differently. I mean, the world is full of so many people who are ready to trash ideas or suppress ideas because they're just not open and they're afraid. of what it means. And all it means is that you've been put through something and you've got something else to face. You've got a wider audience, or you've got lesser audience, but what you still have is your good intention and your purity and your creative spirit. That's what this whole industry is all about. When you're creating events for the music industry, I mean, the word industry is a big turnoff for some people, because it's arts, cultural events, making an event out of culture. I mean, that's culture. It's culture is an event. So, I don't know if this, just to wind up the event, we had about 111 survey responses by, I think it was the middle of September. At that time, the event got an average score of a 2, which is pretty good for a kickoff launch event. We had great media coverage, and the partner feedback was extremely complimentary. The people that came in fighting ended up, with extended thank you, a hand of thank you. And that was super meaningful, since that was one of the main goals, was to bring the partners in the fold and make them feel what they were doing was valuable, because it is. Next week, I want to send my proposal for next year, which is a little summary of what we did this year and maybe what I would change. I mean, this is the kind of thing, like you look back and think, okay, we let this thing out the door. Now it needs a haircut. Maybe 35% less programming, more like maybe just more focused, and really investigate with the partners what's trending. Now we all have something to work from now that this first event is launched. And we'll see. You never know what happens year to year. I mean, some of these projects are financed by the Senate. It's public money, and we've got to prove that there's a reason that we are spending it in this way. And what we anticipate to achieve, and how many people we can bring to the city, what it means for the industry, how it strengthens the community in the city, and how that only strengthens the city and the culture. And I guess I'll know in December how to proceed, so that is that. That's my presentation. Anybody have any questions? I have stories bis zum geht nichts mehr about every kind of crazy event. With music events from small, concerts in the living room, or just having, I have a drum kit and a bass and an electric guitar, and he's just in case a musician stops by. I mean, I picked all that stuff up. Luckily, I'm not, it's like donations here and there, but those are concert events. Musicians are coming through town, and you got some dinner, and then suddenly there's a jam. It's an event, and just having those things there and knowing how to wire stuff. I can run some audio equipment. I can run video equipment. I only say, do what you can. Surf as much as you can on the internet. Sign up for stuff. Learn how to what kind of cables these are. If you're in the music industry at all, know your cables. It's still programming the digital audio stations like Ableton and Logic and things. I mean, I can play around in those. I'm not an expert in any of those. I can run Final Cut. I can run different software. It's not important to be an expert unless that's your calling. But as a generalist, in order to pull off any event, it's important to know what you're expecting of someone else to do. So if you've got the time to learn a little bit about something, then it makes it easier for the person who's doing something for you. I can talk to an editor of a video, and I'm not saying why is there a time code, or where's it. It's like you educate yourself on what other people do, and it only helps you working together, better. Any questions? Yeah.
Your interns gave you this amazing ring.
Oh.
You just told me.
I did.
No, I really love it, and maybe because I think the majority is like 20, in the early 20s. Can you talk about your interns a bit?
Oh,
like
yeah.
how they came and what they did and how it turned out. Why they gave you this ring?
This is a transformer ring.
Yeah.
It's the source of all my power. So there were 4 interns in the office. The office was structured, there was the project manager, and he had an assistant. And there was a press and communications guy, Tommy Nick, and he had an intern, Sarah Lausimus. And marketing, Agima Samson, she had an intern, Roxana Svitala. And then I had one intern, Felicia Schmidt, but I stole the other one that was supposed to be working for everyone, Stephanie Gidde. So I basically had 2 interns in my office, and that was it. We did this whole program. Not without the help of the partners and so on, but I don't even think that the interns knew that they were going to be doing as much as they did. They concepted. I split up the mini conferences, and so Felicia had 4 and Steph had 4. Oh no, Felicia had 5 and Steph had 4 plus the keynote. So each had 5 sessions or segments to really sweat about. They took care of the hospitality, they made grids. We had no database when we started this project. So they built the database, and that involved entering from different industry books and resources, our own personal contacts. So the interns built an entire database based on some Excel tabellen, on an Excel worksheet that it created. And everything from really saying, I'd say, okay, Geld, we want to have some experts, consultants, and then people can apply for an hour, 50 minutes, to have a consultancy. So basically, Felicia would have to write the letter and draft all these letters to the people who would attend, follow up with them, assign them to the expert, keep in touch with the expert. It was so much. And I just reviewed, they'd write it. I'd say, well, let's try this around. And write things the way you would need to read them if you had to go to this thing. What's the most important information? And that helps with business writing. And be polite, be vague only when you need to be. Be as targeted and direct as you can. So they concepted, they translated, they did all of the hotel and travel arrangements, created grids and show flows. The show flow is the order, the document that you refer to when you're going through the order of the show. So it has the cues in it. What time, how many minutes, who's on stage, what the stage setup looks like, what the audio cues are, what the visual cues are, so that the technician running the table can just follow through. And normally in a larger production, there's what they call the front of house. Our front of house here is back here by Lucas. He's running the sound and the video. I'm standing house right, stage left. So it's like learning kind of things like that when someone's, okay, if I'm on the stage, what's the left? So that's stage left, which for the house is house right. So it's like just picking up on practical things and creating diagrams that tell people where to be. So they created travel itineraries for everyone that said, for your session, meet stage right behind the curtain for your audio wiring. And then when it came to the actual production, they wired all of the guests, made sure the guests had what they need, and they ran the show. So they did everything. Helped when they were helping me translate things. This was major. You know, we had to write emails to political people who were sitting on the Senate to invite them to come participate in sessions. So to be kind of a little more formal, and really writing mails to sound legitimate, right? Writing mails to sound like you really know the direction of something even though it's still in Bau. There's a lot of tricks that I was able to show the interns that I learned over years just in how to hustle. I mean, you have to hustle this thing. You have to be producing it while you're still deciding what it is, which is anti how I like to work, which is your content first, and then you package it. And here, you're under the gun to package. You need to get billboards out. You need to promote. But what are you selling? So those were some of the struggles that I had on the job we're deciding what to do. And then to be the leader and to instruct someone to help you hustle, to help you kind of move things along. But I think it's an incredibly exciting field. And there's a lot of things that you do in this. I mean, when you learn about doing all these things and managing an event, I mean, creating a concept against production. Some creative people don't have any idea what's involved. They don't know their cables. So you're stuck, or you see someone just standing over someone who needs to make a change, not knowing what's involved in making that change, and their anger and energy is just appalling because they don't know what's actually involved. They just want to see something changed. So learning about all these aspects and doing everything from calling and getting quotes to find out how much it would cost to have 20 rickshaws haul people around the city just to know that how much it would cost if we wanted to do it. So an idea has to have a cost associated with it. And it's funny because the government and a lot of agencies have this drei Angebot regel. We have to get 3 offers. And it sounds like a pain in the ass, and it is, but it actually, can save you it's worth it. I saved in LA, I saved a company $45,000 by getting the offers, because they were only going to one company, and that company was charging them $45,000 more than it actually cost to do the job. So I was golden from then on. I was already worth my meager paycheck, but it's unbelievable. The differences in rickshaws, there was a 4,000 euro difference between the charming, like ratty old rickshaw versus these super power, sleek looking, they look like eggs, So, and it all depends what you want for your event. A sponsor comes along and says, oh yeah, we want a brand presence. Oh, we'd love to have rickshaws. We think that's a cool idea, and we're going to pay to have the most expensive ones because it's got the most space for our brand logo. So when you get your 3 offers for something, it doesn't mean you have to pay for it. It means you know how much it costs if someone wants to know, and someone might want to pay for that. It could be the perfect thing for them. So that's an example of what the interns were doing at first, was just researching how much it would cost to implement certain creative ideas or certain creative aspects of the project. And there's one phrase, I hate to hear it, but you should know it. It's always better to ask forgiveness than to beg permission. It means, you do something and then you present it because you can show someone something, But if you ask, people are going to say, no, I don't think, or we don't have the money, or and they don't even know how much it would cost, or they don't really realize the value it brings. And then in the end, it's, well, you didn't ask me, but this is a good thing. Or just in general, I mean, it's used in more extreme cases when you actually do something without asking. But in terms of preparing, it's better to find out, get your background information and present an idea with a cost associated with it. Otherwise, people have a tendency to shut you down because they can't imagine. You'd be surprised how unvisual people are who claim to be designers or creative. They need to see something almost more than anyone else. I work a lot with words, and I pull in some images, but be careful, because if you show an image, sometimes they want that. You have to be careful between the rendering or the mood. There's all these different levels of visualizing an idea to share with somebody. And I think I would just tag that onto my advice to, drafts and disclaimers. this is an idea. It could go in different directions. But then there's the danger of people who, once they see a visual picture, they dismiss it if they don't like the picture, or they kind of insult it. I think I had one concept. Oh, it was like an Alice in Wonderland concept for a party for a company, and wanted to do a giant stuffed rabbit or like balloon rabbit on the roof. Just a surreal like signature that this is where the event was. Yeah, but only if it's Jeff Koons style. It's like, well, okay, did you have to say it like, there's no saying, okay, it could be Jeff Koons style, it could be this, let's look into it. But someone say, no, only if it's this or only if it's that, you run into all kinds of people, and, well, I mean, we do every day for everything. So the best is to just try and stay relaxed and calm and true to, and at the end of the day, if you're getting paid to listen to someone tell you it's got to be Jeff Koons style, then you got to listen to it because they're paying you to listen to that. It depends where you are in the chain, but remaining calm, and it's rarely ever personal. I mean, even if people are saying something targeted to you that feels personal, it's never personal. It's just their inability, they're bringing something to you or to your work that may not have anything to do with you or your work. It just has to do with the last good conversation they had or the last bad conversation they had. And I've experienced that over and over and over and over through the years. And then, it doesn't mean it doesn't get to you. But in terms of creating and concepting an event, when that's what you have to give, and you have to give your full understanding of what it means to create or design something, you can't be too precious about it, because in a way, it's your gift to people. And your idea and your creation, your event, your sculpture, your music, your song, your dance, it's a gift. And if people don't want your gift, it can think, well, they don't get my gift. This is actually good for them, and this is better. But if people aren't receptive, remember what I mentioned earlier, find a different way to explain it. And then, because ultimately, you don't even necessarily want to show somebody your dance. Your dance is the gift, but what's the story? And if they're not listening to the story, just try and tell it a different way. It's got life advice, it's business advice, but it's really in this world of designing events for people, whether it's just a general public event or if it's business event. We're in the business of people. Just try and communicate, find out what the goal is, find out what people are already doing and they want to bring to the table, and don't force it if it doesn't fit, if it doesn't feel right. There's something to be said for staying in the box. There's a lot of answers inside the box. You don't have to think outside the box to think that you've got something new. There's parts of the box that people have no idea are even there, and that's what you can show them within their comfort level and within their existing structure. You can find solutions that you're proud of and that work for everyone. That's what I was teaching my interns. I also taught them, this is here for a reason, 2 very important concepts in dealing with the music industry. There's ego fellatio and sacrolingus. And it's important to know when to use both or either. This is obviously ideal. This is what a lot of people expect. That's, the flip chart. If I could save the flip chart from the project in this office, I could have made billions of euros for a little music industry self-help guide, but I didn't. We had a good time. We laughed a lot, and especially when things were particularly tense. If you can't laugh and relax, I guess that's why they gave me the Transformer ring. I think I had these little transformer toys, I think, when I went in, and I let everyone choose one. I think somebody gave me a handful, so everyone had one on their computer, and then when my birthday rolled around, I got this transformer ring and a nice handmade card, and it was really touching, and I felt really good. And I said, actually, my interns could have been my daughters. I mean, I don't have kids, but it was numerically possible that they could have, and they were like, why? It's just, it was not really comprehensible that I could be their mom, especially the way we interacted, but, you never know. I mean, I feel ageless. I feel, but we laughed a lot, and I listened to them when they had questions. That's important. If I needed to not listen, I would ask for a few minutes, but I was never doing anything that was more important than finding out what they needed because they were helping me. And I'm so proud they really stepped up and made that thing happen, that event. They were reliable. All the speakers that were involved in the event knew who they were and knew that they could go to them for the answer. Because if I was one above, I was making sure everything was taken care of top level, and they were right underneath. So my mind was on 9, 10 things. They each had 5. So that's how the trickle down worked. And they worked well together. And because we shared an office, it was easy, because if the workload got too intense for Felicia, then Steph could say, I can take care of that, or they could swap, because the basic structure was the same for what they needed to do, so swapping some tasks worked. I mean, translating is really hard when there's a lot of other things going on. Creative writing or coming up with a concept is really hard. And it was never expected that anybody spit out a final product. And that's what I think a lot of anxiety comes from. I mean, even at my professional level, I mean, I spit out great ideas all the time, It doesn't mean they fit or they can be finalized. But you always have somebody look at your work. Does this make sense? And then in terms of drafting something for the first time and then passing it on to a different department, we had one funny example where the girls drafted up a concept, and it was really a draft. And the rest of the team thought it looked so official, it looked so done, that we were way out of bounds, that we were doing something that the rest of the team didn't know about. I think I was out of town for 2 or 3 days when that happened, and it was just a comedy of errors, because then they kind of felt some heat that this document that they created was being taken as done. It's like, no, this is for your review and improvement. It's cool that you think it's done, but this is for your review. And then it took a while for that one to blow over. And this is why, again, put Entwurf on everything. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's internships available for September. I can leave the contact then in here if anyone wants to come up and see what Kulturprojekte is all about. It is so much work. It's a lot of work, but you're not just doing some internships where I hear that you don't even know what you did. Like 5 months later, you did some copies or scans, or, this is really, you'll come out of this knowing how to produce and create. And the press department, I mean, it's a lot of companies do rely. There's the scandalous part of interning for companies that are actually making you do work that people get paid a lot of money for, which is the case of the interns that worked for me last year. I thought, wow, that they didn't have the full experience beforehand is, okay, this is a trade-off. Plus, their English got really good. This is 6 months in one room with me, asking about endings constantly. But in a way, if you can find yourself in a situation where you have to do or die, and you feel the that you can be accountable and that you want to be accountable for a whole broad range of things that are happening. And at the end, you can decide where you want to focus. I mean, that's what I asked at the end. What were your favorite parts? If you would come back last year, what would you rather not do? What would you like, or if you could come back again, what would you rather not do? What would you like to do most? And it was an interesting feedback. And it was honest, and that's, what I value most about it. So, is anybody planning on doing any kind of event planning or?
That's just little party. It's festival, some kind of festival, just one day. For next, we will plan to make it for 2 days. It's on the university, on the campus in the university, and we meet some bands and get all the beer and all the security. It's quite big. Well, this year it was quite big. I hope it will be a bit smaller than next year because it was a lot of work and too much work for just 4 people.
4 people?
4 people, yeah. And well, I hope it will be better next year.
Is there a theme for the event?
Well, it's called Sommerkult, and our theme is, well, summer music, something like reggae, or you get party music that, that feels like summer and like well, it's quite interesting because there are a lot of different bands, different music styles, but well, you can get a lot of people there.
It's is it the second year, or was it done before and you just?
Done before, I guess 5 or 6 times, but it wasn't ever that big as this year because we got Mona Nikita Man, and well, we expected about 2,000 people, and I guess there were about 3,000 people. It was a lot of work, and afterwards, after that, because there was so much to get done, and it was horrible.
There are a lot of the considerations that, I mean, from a concept standpoint, you don't really have to think about those, but the production side, so you've got security, permits, safety, all these issues that really become your headache if you don't plan well for it, you know. I mean, the whole ticket sales aspect and marketing. In terms of creating any kind of event, I mean, when I was putting this together, I was wondering what would be the most interesting, kind of an idea of all levels of creating an event, from production, administration, legal, creative. I mean, there's a bigger picture, there's a larger pyramid, but I decided to stay focused on this creative element and engineering kind of an ethos in moving towards what you want to do content-wise. But this can really bite you in the ass if so many people show up and you don't have the right, you don't even have enough wristbands, or you don't have for people to get drinks. I mean, these very logistical concerns that are, like, again, knowing your cables, no logistics. When you go anywhere, who walks into anywhere, a club like me, paranoid, and looks to find out first where the emergency exit is? I've been into some dark, skanky clubs, and it's always good to know how is the DJ getting out, you know, or how is anyone getting out, because people get pushy. I've sustained more injuries in Germany going out than I have in California or Chicago or any. Cigarette burn, somebody's talking and they're doing this, and you're wearing a cigarette burn on your arm, and just kind of, so I always felt like I want to know. And those are the kinds of things when you're producing. I mean, where are the outlets? You know, looking at an apartment or like at a venue, where's the sun going to be at a certain time of day? There's so many things that if you're like a hedonist and you enjoy all aspects of life, this is kind of an interesting position to be in, because you use all of your senses in developing an event, including your conscience, about what's safe for people, when is it too much, and so on. So.
Question? there's a bit of time left. You talked about you organized quite a few big concerts you were working. I think you said as an assistant.
Mm-hmm. I was a production coordinator.
I think basically everybody here is a musician.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you have maybe just one story, because I know you told me quite some stories from these times. Maybe just one for the musicians.
Well, I don't know. So there's one. It's just I don't know. I think of this James Brown story. It's BMW was launching one of their new little coupes. It was like a Z3, and we had rented Tom Cruise's hangar at Santa Monica Airport. So he cleared out his hangar, and we made this big tribuna there and a stage, and the cars were all lined up outside. And do you remember that they were doing those BMW movies with Clive Owen? Did anyone see this series? BMW did a series of Guy Ritchie directed one. Madonna was in. I mean, they used these big stars in these short movies that all featured a BMW as the hero, or the hero was driving this car. And so we're there, and we're doing this launch. The best part of working on these events is sound check. To have the musicians come out. I mean, I saw Missy Elliott at the Sony party when I was working the Sony party, and watching Missy Elliott do her thing with the dancers in their regular sweatpants is just worth the whole investment of my time. But so the James Brown was in this new BMW movie that no one had seen yet. It was a viral thing. And it was a dealer meeting. So all the BMW dealers in the U.S. were in this hangar. It's like 80-some people and their spouses. Airline hangar, where the airplanes are stored inside. So these giant hangar. So they're going to reveal the movie. So the lights go dark. There's a giant screen there. And they show the movie. And in the end, James Brown is in the movie. And at the end of the movie, they didn't even notice they had fog, and the hangar door had opened, and in drives James Brown in one of the new cars and gets out and sings on stage 3 songs. 3 songs with his whole act. And I swear I couldn't believe it. One person stood up. It was like the wife of one of the dealers, and she was like, woo! I couldn't believe, no, they were all just waiting, just waiting and watching James Brown. So it was like a professional shock. You spent all this money, and you have this amazing,
They didn't get it? Or?
No, it just, I don't know, you don't... it's a whole, maybe it's something with the dealer culture, I don't know, or you don't know, nobody, it's like not okay to stand up and say, fuck yeah, but it is, and so that was something that I thought, well, and God knows what James Brown was thinking, maybe he didn't care, he's got his money and the ladies were there, but I made a cape out of a trash bag, and I walked up to my boss at the time, and when he was getting he had this sequenced cape, with the flag, all sequins. And when he was getting his cape on, I walked up and I put the trash bag cape on my boss. I was like, okay. But I don't know, music stories, no real from the concerts, and just this sitting at the table during the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concert and eating at the cafeteria with Dr. John, at the same table. I don't know, just being around musicians and creative types I like. And I've only been starstruck once in my life, and it was last summer with Jaki Liebezeit. I talk to everybody, I've done these concerts and all this work with production, and okay, you need to get on stage, picking up the drummer from Aerosmith from the hotel while he's got 2 hoochie mamas hanging on him, and I'm like, no, just let's go. The bus is waiting. And But I did an event last summer at the Hafen where I had Paul Murata from the Styrenes, and he led a 12-person ensemble of Terry Riley's In C.
Mark Mata was also playing.
Yeah, Mark Mata. Yeah, he was doing the pulse on the with vinyl for that piece. And for opening for that was Jaki Liebetzeit with his drums off Chaos through a friend with Jens Uwe Bayer, who's pop no name. And so they did, so it was just straight up congas. And I couldn't believe it. I loved Can, and I was blushing, and I was like a child. And just telling him, here's the food, here's some hospitality. And he was impressed. He really liked the event, and that was really special. So you never know. It's all a job. I mean, and as a musician, the responsibility is on you to perform and do your art. There's musicians that I worked with in the context of corporate events where they're in a ballroom, and their musicians or a band is playing cues for executives to come up, like it's warm up. It's easy money. Well, okay, maybe it's not that easy. You have to be good, and you have to be able to take cues. You're wired up, and the stage manager will call go, standby, band, and then your cue is go, and you'll play your cue. The larger events like the Academy Awards or any of these, there's like we talked about the front of house, and the stage manager is actually calling all the cues. There's one person responsible. That the lighting designer, the lighting engineer, the video guys, the audio, everything is lined up. The stage hands, they move in and make that show happen, that the cues are changed. There's a phenomenal amount of work. The larger these shows that you see on TV, the award shows, and with music, it's an incredible amount of crew. And a lot of these people, they've worked together for years, because when you have a good guy on tone, and you have an amazing woman stage managing, calling, like you go in and you're a team, because someone blows a call, that's the show. And people aren't very forgiving in bringing you back when you blow a call. I mean, I've seen a lot of people lose gigs because they just weren't focused. And it's an incredible amount of focus and dedication to make these things come off. And people are working. That's another thing with musicians that I did notice. Maybe it's just something with DJs, because that wasn't my culture. I did like a lot of punk and rock stuff in the US. And since I've been in Germany, it's been a lot of electronic music, a lot of DJ sets. And what I don't understand is why people go up and think that you can just talk to the performer, to the DJ thing. Just talk and talk and talk when that's work. I mean, you have to focus. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. And I think it's a protocol, and it's really rude. And that you're putting everyone else's evening a little bit in jeopardy by jawing the ear off of the performer. So that's something that I haven't quite got understood in the context of producing an event or promoting an event, or for the party promoters. Or I've seen terrible. So you guys have you been over to the Papierfabrik when it was still open? Yeah, is that? I mean, it was for me crazy to see the lack. Like, okay, where's the water for these guys? Or like, where's the support? These wires are dangling. Literally, they had to move some of the wires together so the one monitor wouldn't go out. And I thought, oh, can you censor that out of the video? Can you do a beep? Or my complaints about local venue? But that was that. Yeah, okay. But that was like an ad hoc event. This warehouse was being closed down, and they opened it up to do some parties, so it was never going to be wired like a real venue. So, I mean, great that those guys pulled that off as long as they did. But I don't know, it's exciting. It's exciting to do music. It's exciting to get involved and know what the people are doing to support what it is that you do as a musician. That there's whole conferences and people vying for the audience for these conferences to support an industry that revolves around musicians. So it's business, but focus on your art.
I think that's a good endpoint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.